I knew something was wrong the second I opened my gate and saw the $7.200 HOA fine taped there on land that wasn't even part of an HOA. By sundown, someone had edited my property line at 213A, another accidental adjustment that conveniently pushed my acreage into their jurisdiction. Then came the eviction notice. Then, a 6-foot trench carved straight into my pasture for community improvements. They thought I'd panic. They thought I'd pack up. But they didn't know who they were messing with. Because the moment I saw that forged boundary line, I realized the HOA wasn't just harassing me, they were covering up something much bigger. I first saw her on a windless Wednesday morning, one of those Colorado days where every sound feels louder than it should. Her luxury SUV eased up my gravel road like it was too good for the dust touching its tires. The door opened with a soft, expensive click, and out stepped a woman built entirely from rules, perfume, and entitlement. Perfect hair, oversized sunglasses, clipboard hugged to her chest like a badge she'd issued herself. She didn't greet me, she evaluated me. "I'm Karen Westmore, president of the Ridgewood Meadows HOA," she declared, tone sharp enough to slice fence wire. She waited for recognition. None came. Her smile tightened. "We've noticed unauthorized activity on this property. Equipment noise landscaping not aligned with our community standards." I let that settle before answering. "This land isn't in your community." A tiny flicker crossed her face, a mix of offense and disbelief that her authority didn't reach this far. "Oh, it will," she said lightly, but her voice carried a threat. "Boundary adjustments are already in motion. You'll receive documentation soon." She turned back to her SUV, heels sinking in my dirt, like the ground itself rejected her. And in that moment I understood Karen didn't think she was enforcing rules. She thought she was claiming territory. 20 years of digging through deeds, maps, and court files had taught me one thing: land doesn't lie. People do. After decades in windowless offices buried under fluorescent lights, attorneys breathing down my neck, and judges asking me to explain the difference between a real boundary line and one someone photoshopped at 3 a.m., I needed dirt I could feel. Real land, honest land. That's how I found the old Coulter place, 180 acres sitting just outside Ridgewood Meadows, untouched, wild, and waiting for someone who cared. The barn leaned like it had seen one too many winters. The fence sagged, the creek barely remembered it had ever carried water. Most people would see decay. I saw freedom. And the paperwork backed it up: clean deed, clear, survey markers, zero HOA involvement. The moment I walked out of the county office, folder in hand, I felt lighter than I had in years. The first week was quiet. Perfect quiet. I patched the barn roof with aluminum sheets, rebuilt the sagging bridge over the creek, cleared overgrown trails, hooked up my solar generator, and brewed black coffee each morning, watching the wind whisper through the grass. Even Sheriff Denny Hope stopped by, broad and skeptical, nodding at my work. "Don't let those HOA folks push you around," he said. "They like to think the county ends where their street signs do." I laughed. He didn't, and then the SUV rolled up. Smooth tires on gravel engine, almost too quiet for something that big. Out stepped Karen Westmore. Blonde, perfect hair, oversized sunglasses, clipboard hugged tight like a shield and a weapon. She didn't greet me. She measured me, evaluated me. "We've noticed activity," she said, voice sharp, practiced. "Equipment landscaping noise, non-compliant with community standards." I let her words hang. "Ma'am, my land isn't part of your HOA," I said. Her smile tightened, sharp and cold. "The borders have been adjusted," she replied. Calm, certain, threatening. That night I pulled up the county records. My stomach sank. Someone had already moved my property line. Someone had touched my land in the system, and they thought I wouldn't notice. It hit me in a way I hadn't felt in years. Peace wasn't just fragile. It had already become a battlefield. And Karen Westmore wasn't here to negotiate. She was here to claim. I woke one early morning to a soaked piece of paper flapping wildly on my gate. The heading screamed, "Notice of Violations, Unauthorized Activity." The fine, $7.200. For what exactly? Clearing brush, fixing a sagging barn, moving freely on my own land. My first instinct was disbelief. My second, cold amusement. By mid-morning, a sleek SUV rolled slowly along my gravel drive, tires whispering against the stone. Inside sat Karen, impeccable hair, oversized sunglasses, clipboard clutched like a sword. She didn't knock. She didn't introduce herself properly. She measured, evaluated, claimed authority she had no right to. Every instinct I had built over 20 years in forensics screamed this wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate, a test, a challenge. They wanted to see how I'd react, how far I'd let them push. I photographed the fine, time-stamped it, and stored multiple copies. Then I realized this was no longer a simple HOA annoyance. They were planting the first seeds of a war they didn't yet know they'd lost. 2 nights later, insomnia drove me to my computer. I logged into the county GIS portal heart, already anticipating trouble. Parcel 228C. My boundaries had been tampered with manual edits at 2:13 a.m. No documentation, no approval, just a ghostly digital fingerprint. L. Harrison. My stomach tightened. Someone had pushed my property line into Ridgewood Meadows in the dead of night. Someone thought I wouldn't notice. I printed 3 high-resolution screenshots, toggling every map layer, every zoom, each time stamped with surgical precision. Then I called the county clerk. Silence. Hesitation. Nothing should be approved after hours. Unless an emergency filing, the voice whispered. I knew better. This wasn't bureaucratic error. This was deliberate fraud. Paid, executed, calculated. Karen was reaching into government systems, rewriting reality as easily as drawing a line in dirt. I stored the screenshots in a waterproof folder labeled Threat Log Has Shown Digital Fraud. Old school, irrefutable. My fight was no longer only about fines, it was about truth itself, and they just tried to steal it. By dawn, 2 days later, my generator had gone dead. The cable was snipped clean, my main gate unbolted, swinging like a broken promise. I checked the trail cams. 2 figures moved under infrared light, cautious, precise, terrifyingly familiar. One crouched over the generator, scissors flashing. The other worked the gate, and then enough to recognize him, Tyler Westmore. Karen's son, the HOA monitoring director, a boy who policed mailbox colors and paint shades, now trespassing like a professional saboteur. I grabbed the SD cards and drove straight to Sheriff Denny Hope at 130A. He watched the footage leaning back, eyes narrowing. Cutting your generator line, unbolting your gate, felony territory. He shook his head slowly. This is going to require an investigation. You prepared for that? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We both knew. This wasn't civil. It wasn't harassment. It was escalation. By sunrise, my land had been violated. The HOA had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored, and the realization sank into me slow and cold. Karen Westmore wasn't playing games. She was testing the limits of criminal audacity. By the next morning, the real war began. 5 envelopes wedged like missiles into the wire mesh of my gate. Violations, barn repairs, landscaping, heavy machinery, environmental disruption, and eviction. I pinned them neatly on a fence post facing the county road. Let them stew. The HOA's own officers pulled up in a hybrid sedan, muttering, hesitant, unsure. They didn't even approach me. Every fine screamed absurdity, but the pattern was clear intimidation dressed as bureaucracy. I documented everything, photos, timestamps, logs, notes. Sheriff Hope observed, nodding. They're moving fast, he said, crossing lines. You're doing it right, document, don't engage. I smiled cold. The HOA had brought their rules as weapons. I had forensics timestamps evidence, and for every move they made I had proof waiting. 3 days later, the trap I had laid paid off. I returned from a supply run to the southern edge of my land. My headlights fell on a 6-foot-wide, 7-foot-deep trench, running through the protected aquifer monitoring zone. Fresh dirt orange flags, PVC stakes, laminated signs, all HOA branding. I walked the edge. Dirt still warm. Evidence undeniable. Trail cams had caught every step. Tyler Westmore and his crew had crossed 17 feet into my property directly over where the forged boundary had tried to claim my land. I measured, photographed, geotagged, documented every angle, every QR code, every line in their project summary screamed fraud, edited 122A. M. Adobe Illustrator, K. Westmore. Metadata didn't lie. This wasn't harassment anymore. This wasn't civil dispute. This was felony criminal escalation, environmental interference, trespass. Karen had walked straight into the trap. I exhaled slowly, watching the sunset hit the trench. The war had officially escalated, and I was ready. The morning the DA convoy rolled into Ridgewood Meadows, the quiet streets felt tense, almost alive. 3 SUVs, blacked-out windows, steel bumpers, government plates parked with deliberate precision. Residents peeked from porches, coffee mugs in hand, whispering questions no one dared speak aloud. I followed behind in my pickup evidence, tucked under my jacket, heartbeat steady. Inside the clubhouse, Karen Westmore presided at the head of the table, pearls gleaming, clipboard in hand, barking orders about Phase 2 of some imaginary expansion. Board members shuffled papers, nervously, unaware that the world outside their glass windows had changed. I walked in. Silence fell. Thick, immediate, deadly. "Well," I said, voice calm, controlled, "you might want to sit down." Karen's eyes narrowed, mouth twisting. "You have no authority here," she hissed. I opened the folder and laid out Lorraine Harper's ledger. Developer kickbacks, forged invoices, unauthorized transfers, every page a nail in the coffin. Karen's expression hardened, then cracked a flicker of panic she tried desperately to hide. Board members glanced at each other, pale, some leaning in, realizing the foundation of their world was already crumbling. She tried to interrupt, but I held up a hand. "This isn't about arguing rules. This is about evidence you can't escape." The room shifted. The air hummed with tension. Karen realized, perhaps too late, that the quiet threat she had underestimated, the forensic precision, the documentation, the years of expertise, was fully in motion. Marissa stepped forward and projected the digital files onto the boardroom monitor. Screenshots of the 213A.M. boundary edits, SD card footage of Tyler cutting the generator line, geotagged coordinates, GPS trails, time-stamped photographs, metadata from the forged HOA maps, and the QR code linking to the fake environmental project PDF. Every denial Karen spat was met with irrefutable proof. The ledger corroborated every illegal transaction, every bribe, every falsified record. Emails from Clerk Harrison showing the facilitation payment and midnight edits flashed on the screen. Tyler's sabotage, logged and time-stamped, left no room for her lies. Karen's composure faltered. She pointed, gestured, hissed, tried to redirect blame, but with every attempt, the evidence weighed heavier, pressing down on the room like concrete. The board members leaned forward, eyes wide, some whispering to each other, some shaking their heads. I could see the shift. She had spent years controlling others with fear and bureaucracy. Now her own tactics were unraveling thread by thread on the very screens she could not control. I pulled the last piece, the trench measured and documented. The environmental violation 17 feet into my property. Metadata screamed her authorship: Adobe Illustrator CCK, Westmore 122A. Every layer confirmed intent. The room fell, silent anticipation thick as fog. Karen's plan, meticulous and bold, had hit the wall of truth, and it was crumbling fast. Sheriff Daniels stepped forward, voice authoritative, calm. "Karen Westmore, you are under arrest for falsification of land records, environmental interference, conspiracy to commit fraud, bribery of a public official, and tampering with utility infrastructure." Her eyes went wide. She screamed, "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president." Two deputies advanced. She swiped binders off the table, knocking papers, flying claws, gripping anything to maintain control. But control had left the building the moment evidence hit the room. The ledger lay open. The forged maps glowed on the screen. Tyler's trail cam footage, metadata, GPS records, every time-stamped document, all pointed to premeditated criminal action. Lorraine Harper's testimony was ready. Clerk Harrison's confession awaited. Karen was cornered in a cage of her own making. The board filed out silently, some pale, some shaking, all avoiding eye contact. Karen was alone, fury and disbelief etched across her face. She twisted toward me, voice low, venomous. You ruined everything." I leaned forward just enough for her to see, steady as the evidence stacked against her. "No, you did that yourself." The deputy snapped handcuffs around her wrists. In a quiet moment of surrender, she whispered almost to herself, "They promised me $500,000. I slid the final page across the table, the forged map with her metadata burned into the corner. "Your maps," I said, turning toward the door, "are bleeding." Outside, neighbors gathered, phones, raised whispers swelling into murmurs of vindication. Karen's illusion of authority, built over years, dissolved in front of them all. By noon, the DA had taken possession of all evidence. Karen, Tyler, and Harrison were all facing felony charges. My land finally had a moment of peace. The war wasn't over entirely, but the loudest, ugliest battle had been won. The morning after the DA raid, I stepped onto my porch with a mug of black coffee, letting the crisp Colorado air wash over me. The prairie stretched wide, golden under the sun, wind ruffling sage, and wildflowers carrying the faint tang of cedar from the barn. For the first time in months, the land felt mine, not just in the legal sense, but in every sense that mattered. Neighbors I had never met approached cautiously at first, then with smiles, handshakes, and congratulations. Some brought pies. Others asked how they could protect their own properties or conserve the land. Even Sheriff Denny Hope stopped by, leaning on his cruiser with a tired, genuine grin. "You sure stirred the hornet's nest," he said. I laughed softly. Not my first time dealing with hornets. The land was quiet, almost reverent. No SUVs creeping up gravel drives, no tape holding threatening fines to gates, no lurking maps waiting to rewrite reality. The air itself seemed lighter. Coyotes called in the distance. The creek whispered over stones. I walked the fence line, checking the new posts, the restored bridge, the repaired barn. Every measurement, every corner, every survey pin confirmed the truth. I had fought for this land, every inch of it was mine. For the first time in years, I could breathe. Really breathe, not in spurts or cautious sips, but deep, long, and steady. The war had taken everything it could, sleep, nerves, patience, but it had not taken the land. Weeks later, the courthouse felt almost alive. Same beige walls, same squeaky floors, same burnt cardboard coffee, but today purpose hummed through the air. Karen Westmore entered in the county-issued orange inmate uniform. No pearls, no blazer, no clipboard. Only the weight of her crimes and the disbelief that her empire could fall. The DA laid out charges: falsification of land records, forged maps, bribery of a public official, environmental interference, conspiracy to commit fraud and misrepresentation. Tyler Westmore and Clerk Harrison followed, each facing consequences tied directly to their actions. Karen received 7 years in state prison eligibility for supervised release after 4. Tyler got 3 years probation, 200 hours community service, and a felony conviction for tampering with utility infrastructure. Harrison was sentenced to 18 months in county jail, 5 years probation, and permanently banned from any government position. Finally, the HOA itself, Ridgewood Meadows, was dissolved. Its assets seized pending redistribution to affected property owners. Years of intimidation, falsified rules, and forged authority vanished in a single court order. The courtroom felt heavy, but just every forged document, every bribe, every violation was accounted for. Karen's empire, built on fear and paper, had crumbled under the undeniable weight of truth. The judge's gavel didn't just bring an end to her crimes. It affirmed that justice, while slow, eventually finds its mark. Returning home, I drove slowly down the gravel driveway, settlement check in hand, $275,000, enough to restore the barn, rebuild the dock, finish the solar array, and still have room for a life beyond this fight. Marissa handed it to me with a small grin. You earned it. I spent the afternoon on the land. With careful hands, I carried a carved cedar plank from the original barn frame to the front gate and bolted it to the post. I read it aloud. Private land begins here, and your fantasies end. The prairie stretched wide, humming with life. Coyotes called in the distance. The creek murmured. My airstream caught the sun, glinting like a polished coin. Every corner, every blade of grass, every survey pin reinforced a truth I had fought for. This land belonged to me, one with patience, precision, and relentless resolve. Neighbors stopped by, some curious, some grateful, all respectful. Sheriff Hope leaned on his cruiser. You've earned your peace, he said. I nodded, eyes on the horizon. No drones, no forged maps, no fines, no HOA oversight. Just wind, earth, and sunlight. Justice had arrived, nature was restored. And for the first time, I felt unshakable peace, quiet, hard-fought, undeniable. I closed the gate, locked it, and walked back toward the barn, boots crunching on gravel. The land beneath me, alive and steady, was finally mine again.